So we're going to be talking about all different types of grief and loss, bereavement, miscarriage, heartbreak.
I like to think of grief as the loss of the life you hoped or expected to have. It physically hurts. Grief doesn't just sit in our heads. It affects every fibre of our body.
The worst case of grief that I've had to deal with, I was so ill that year.
There is something called broken heart syndrome as well.
Grief does its own thing.
Even me saying to a patient, this is normal, makes a massive difference to them.
Welcome to No Appointment Necessary with me, Cherry Healey.
And me, Dr. Amir Khan. I'm a GP up in Bradford, but you can catch myself and Cherry here on this podcast every week.
Hit subscribe, give us a follow so that you never miss an episode.
And please join our Facebook community. You just have to search for No Appointment Necessary and join in all the fun.
So we're going to be talking about all different types of grief and loss today. We're going to be talking about bereavement, miscarriage, heartbreak, loss of pets. So we're going to be covering all the bases. So we just want to give you a bit of a heads up to make sure that you're in the right headspace to be able to listen to this. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Randox Help, who are bringing you their Every Man and Every Woman health checks.
They are. The Randox Health Every Man and Every Woman check measures up to 150 biomarkers, giving you a complete picture of how your body's really doing. Regular blood testing is one of the best ways to spot potential risks early, so you can make changes that support your long-term health. And they're quick to do. You'll even get a follow-up test 6 months later, so you can track your progress and see the difference your lifestyle changes are making. And for this, there really is no appointment necessary, no GP referral either.
And if you're a busy bee, you'll get your results in just 2 hours from hitting the lab. Use the code NAN15 to get 15% on your Every Man or Every Woman health check until 27th of January. Just go to randoxhealth.com. So grief and loss, Dr. Amir, it's really interesting. I've had conversations about grief and loss before, obviously, as we all have, but never in a medical sense. Yeah. And obviously grief and loss can be lots of things. They can be bereavement, heartbreak, loss of job, children leaving home, loss of pets.
Yeah.
It is part of life.
It is. I like to think of grief when I'm describing it to my patients as the loss of the life you hoped or expected to have. So whether that is the loss of someone, it could be a loss of a job, as you say, it could be the loss of your health as well. All of those things just means your life suddenly takes a turn that you didn't want or expect.
Why does grief hurt?
It physically hurts. Grief doesn't just sit in our heads. It affects every fibre of our body because the brain interprets grief as a massive stress event. So all your brain chemicals go haywire. The messaging between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal ramps up. So the hypothalamus judges your mood and your stress levels. It then puts into action your stress hormones to help manage that stress. So it will send a message to a gland in your brain called the pituitary, which will then send a message to your adrenal glands. And that really ramps up your stress hormone that we talk about a lot, cortisol. So cortisol sends your heart rate up. So that thumping feeling you get in your chest because you've suddenly become bereft or you're grieving. And it can come in waves, is because your cortisol levels are skyrocketing.
So grief is physical.
It is. So as well as your cortisol going up, your nervous system switches into its flight or fight response. So it's called your sympathetic nervous system. So you feel on edge, your anxiety levels go up because you want to get away from this awful feeling. That also triggers your immune system. Yeah. So what often happens with grief is that your immune system then thinks you're about to fight something off. So it goes into that motion of, right, I am ready, I'm here for you. Over time, that will tire and stress that immune system out. And what people find when they're suffering from bereavement or grief is that they get coughs and colds and frequent infections because your immune system isn't working like it should be. It's stressed and tired from always being on edge. You get tummy pain, you can get nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, all of those things associated with grief. Nobody talks about that. We all focus on the loss, don't we? Which I think is important, but those physical symptoms and those physiological changes that are going through that massive stress event. I mean, is there anything more stressful than a bereavement?
It's absolutely extraordinary. I'm just putting so many pieces together. The worst case of grief that I've had to deal with, the worst case of loss, I was so ill that year.
What we know about love and relationships and connections with people, real love in the brain stimulates the same part of your brain as addiction does. And so when you have that sudden loss, you get withdrawal feelings, but also you've got the stress and the anxiety that comes with it. So all of that, the brain is having to deal with so much, the withdrawal, the loss, the emotion, all of that adds up to grief and bereavement. There is something called broken heart syndrome as well.
What is broken heart syndrome?
Yeah, it's actually got a medical term called Takot subocardiomyopathy.
It's not as catchy, but I like it.
We'll call it broken heart syndrome for this. So when you get dumped and you are the victim of that heartbreak, your body goes into that extreme fight or flight response and you make huge amounts of excitatory hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline. They come from your adrenal glands.
Why are they excitatory?
Because they are preparing you to run away from whatever's causing it. So they want to stimulate your body to go.
And it does. It feels like almost like your heart's about to jump out of your chest.
That's a really accurate description because they're made in such high quantities at that moment, they can actually stun your heart. Oof. And that can negatively affect the heart muscle. And what we've seen in broken heart syndrome, we see it in grief if you've lost a loved one, but also if you've broken down a relationship. And some people do sadly die from this condition. I'm not saying that will happen if you get dumped, but we've all heard of, and I've seen this in my patients, where someone who's been together with their spouse for 50 or 60 years and sadly their husband or wife dies and then shortly after they decline and die as well. I'm not saying it's all because of this, but one of the reasons could be this broken heart syndrome where you get sudden surge in these hormones. They put pressure on the heart muscle. And what we've seen is it's almost like a heart attack, but with very clean coronary arteries. But the flip side of it is it can be treated. If we catch it and we know about it, it can be treated medically and people make a good recovery if we know about it.
When do you go and see your GP?
For bereavement and grief.
Loss and heartbreak.
There's no right or wrong answer to that. So what we know about symptoms of bereavement, let's say, or grief, is often they'll come in waves. That is part of the way the body works. These hormones, these brain chemicals, that fight or flight response will ebb and flow. So some days you'll have good days, other days you'll have bad days. Some hours will be bad, other hours won't be bad. Your acute grief period, where the symptoms are the worst, can last, we would say, 6 to 12 months, the worst part of it. Doesn't mean it's going to be that bad for that long, but that is how long we expect it to go on for. If it goes on for more than 12 months, we refer to it as prolonged grief. The difference between that and perhaps something like depression, because grief can trigger depression, is that whereas those symptoms can come and go in waves, depression doesn't. It is there with you all the time. And it's not associated with just the loss of that person. You don't just get sad thinking of that person. You are sad all the time, and your motivation and that constant feeling of this will never get better, I can't see the light, is really when you should go and see a doctor. But I would say even if you are suffering from intense grief, that acute grief response, which is so physical and you can't manage it, come and speak to us, because even just speaking about it and saying, even me saying to a patient, this is normal for what you've gone through, makes a massive difference to them.
I actually went to see my GP at the end of this year of loss because my digestive system just wasn't healing and I'd obviously upset it so much. And she said, I wish you'd come to see me a year ago when you were really, really sad and I could have helped you in some way. How can you as a GP help someone who's really in acute grief or loss? What can you actually do?
So it's not about giving them medication. It's about providing them with the right support and tools to understand their grief, to live alongside their grief, because nothing will get rid of that grief feeling and the sense of loss, but to live their life around it. And a lot of that involves talking therapy and bereavement counselling. And bereavement counselling is free in the UK, so you don't have to pay for it. You go and see your doctor and we will either refer you for it or we'll give you a number to call where you can refer yourself. And within that counselling, they do a little bit of cognitive behavioural therapy where they help you accept the loss. But when you think of the loss of whatever it is, you're not associating it with negative thoughts. You start associating that loss with more positive thoughts. So when people say to you, think about the good times that you had, which sounds like a bit of a flippant comment, doesn't it? But it's not about minimizing the loss that you've got. It's about maximizing all those precious moments that you had with that person. So when you think of them, you don't think, what am I going to do without them? You think, oh my God, remember that lovely time we had that weekend when we did this, and you have a positive feeling rather than a negative one.
How does that physiologically change over time? What is the actual bodily process of going through grief and healing? What is going on inside us?
As your brain and body adapt to the loss, those surges become less frequent and less intense. So even though the emotional loss still feels very raw and real, the physical symptoms should start to ease off a little bit. But it can take time. And it depends on everyone's individual circumstances. You know, this idea that time heals all wounds isn't necessarily true when it comes to bereavement. What I often say to patients is that the bereavement becomes easier to live alongside. It will never go away. It will always be there on the side of you or around you, but you learn to live with it rather than forget about it. When you feel completely numb, you're not getting any enjoyment out of anything, and everything feels dark and you cannot see an end to it, then that is really when you should come and speak to us.
I know in theory it's nice, it's good to talk, but why does it really help?
It depends on the type of talking therapy. For this, it's usually cognitive behavioural therapy. And that actually encourages this idea of neuroplasticity, of your brain adapting to the experience that you're having. So linking things with positive thoughts rather than negative thoughts is changing the way your brain thinks and the way the brain adapts. So cognitive behavioural therapy is such a good tool to have when it comes to bereavement. Linking loss with positive thoughts, I think, is so difficult to do, but they really talk you into how to do it. And you can actually find these things online on apps as well. I'm not an expert in it because I generally defer to someone else to do it, but I know that's what happens when they go.
If you've got a friend who's going through bereavement, loss of any kind, what should you look out for where you think actually this person needs to go and see a medical professional?
So again, first of all, the mental side of things, so the depression and the anxiety. If they are refusing to come out of the house, refusing to engage with other people, or feel like they can't get out of bed, or, it's been a certain, let's say 12 weeks and they're really not engaging with anything that they used to do, definitely encourage them to speak to a medical professional. But I think particularly with bereavement, this risk of broken heart syndrome is very real. And if you've got palpitations or chest pain, which is, remember, this mimics a heart attack and often looks like a heart attack as well. But if you've got palpitations, chest pain, shortness of breath, sweatiness, come and see us straight away. Go to A&E or come and see us as GPs.
Why does grief often cause really bad digestive problems? Why does it affect your body like that?
So there's a few reasons. Firstly, 70% of your immune system is made in your gut and it's linked to gut health. And when you are bereft or feeling lost, one of the symptoms of that, the physiological changes, because your body goes into that fight or flight response, your immune system is on high alert because it thinks it's under attack from somewhere. And that immune system, a lot of that is coming from your gut. Anything that stresses the immune system stresses the gut. So you can get diarrhea, bloating, because your gut microbiome is stressed, your immune system is stressed, therefore your gut is stressed. So things run through you. And that brain-gut axis is very, very real.
What should you be doing? What can you do to help the healing process?
So I think routine is key. So this is what I say to my patients. So I'm actually the palliative care lead for our practice.
Oh, you really? What does that mean?
So I oversee the patients who are end of life, essentially. And, they may have a condition like a cancer or a terminal illness, and they're coming up to their end of life. It's not me who just looks after them. It's a team of people, of which I'm a very, very small part. I make sure the quality of care that our practice gives these patients is, because I always say a good death is just as important as a good life.
What is a good death and what is a bad death?
A good death is when we have listened to the patient who is dying and we've put their wishes into action, and we've also made sure that them and their families are comfortable right up until the end and beyond. So that is making sure they are dying where they want to die, and no medical interventions are either withheld or done to them that they do not want. We make sure that they are not in pain and that they're not struggling with their breathing or they're not anxious. There are things that we can give them right up until the end that will help manage those symptoms. But we also make sure that the family are not distressed through it all. So those kind of really difficult questions are really important to have. And the earlier you have them, and I can't stress this enough because people want to put them off for as long as possible because it almost feels like you're tempting fate. The people often say that. I don't want to have this discussion because I don't want to think about dying and I don't want to think about my loved one dying. But also, I don't want to tempt fate. But we're all going to die. And there is no too early time to have the talk about death and what you want for your own death. And so whenever someone has an illness that we know of that is terminal, we don't wait until they're weeks or months away. We go in early and talk to them early. And the key thing there to remember is you can change your mind at any time.
What is it like for you having to be that person at the end of life?
It's actually very rewarding, if that's the right word, because it's one of the times in your medical career that you can make a massive difference to a family. And you really get to know the patient and the family more so than I would do at any other time in my career, because you're in their homes. It's also very sad because you get to know these people really well and you know what's going to happen. But I genuinely think it's one of the most rewarding parts of my job.
Do you find it scary?
I don't find it scary. As a doctor, you have to be really careful with your emotions about how much you attach yourself to patients, particularly those who are dying. But it's impossible not to get that involved with patients who are dying and their families. And I have sat and cried with family members before. But in terms of scary, no, I don't find it scary.
Do you learn to compartmentalize certain emotions?
For the vast majority, yes. But there will always be a patient or a scenario that you go home and you think about a lot and a lot and a lot.
What do you do to make sure that you're not taking it home or you're not being traumatized again and again from this?
I think it's really important. When I'm driving home, I will listen to a really funny podcast or radio station. I will go to the gym and I will go home and I'll watch something on the TV or go out with my friends, something that doesn't involve any of that at all.
Have you dealt with severe grief before?
It's not something I talk about all that often, Cherry. My dad died when I was quite young, I would say, in my 20s. And it was expected. I don't know if that makes it easier. I didn't feel any easier, to be honest. He had a long-term heart condition and he was confined to the downstairs room for most of the last kind of couple of years of his life. But we weren't expecting him to die on that particular day. And I was actually at work as a junior doctor and I got a call halfway through my shift. And I had to finish and go home. And I remember that drive home being, even though it was only a few miles, it felt like forever. And then I got to my mum and dad's house and he wasn't there. They'd taken him to the hospital. So then I had to drive over to the hospital. I think it was emotionally really traumatic. But actually it hit my mum really hard. Yeah. And I think supporting her was my main main job at the time. And
Kind of give you a focus.
it gave me a focus. And actually, what else then gave me a focus was organising the funeral and everything like that. And so there was so much paperwork involved in that, and phone calls and appointments that I don't think, and I still don't think I've dealt with it properly, because everybody else was crying, but I remember not crying at all because I had to sort out loads of different things. I've never cried about it, actually, never. And I feel a bit guilty about that. And like, but then I've realised, there's no right or wrong way to suffer.
Grief does its own thing.
It does its own thing.
Do you still feel sad about it?
Yeah, totally.
Does it just hit you randomly? I think sometimes, when I lost my dad, it's just, it will hit me in, I'm buying Kievs in the supermarket and you'll just go, oh God. And then you just...
How was it for you?
I had a funny relationship with my dad towards the end, but I felt really sad for him. I felt really sad. And he didn't have a particular, I would say, like a nice death. So I was really sad for him. So my grief was very much about wishing I could have taken that pain away, and could I have done more, and there was a lot of guilt there. And so it was like you say, it's so individual.
It is. I don't think I had the best relationship with my dad either, but I wonder whether this is true for you, because it's certainly true for me. I feel like I'm mourning the relationship I should have had with him and the relationship I wish I had.
Right.
And I think that makes me emotional.
Right.
And when I see I'm sorry.
That's me, darling. By the way, that is exactly.
Do you find when you see on TV or anything, when people have really good relationships with their dad, that is what gets me?
Well, but my kids have the most amazing relationship with their father, and he is one of the most amazing people on the planet. And I feel myself healing when I watch them being fathered. I'm like, oh,
that's nice.
That helps me process my weird flavour of grief.
No, that makes
what about
sense.
You?
I think seeing other dads do a really good job, which sounds really simple, it really makes me happy.
Grief is both physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, mystical. Yeah. It's a particularly extraordinary part of being a human being.
It is.
What about if you're supporting someone who's lost someone or going through bereavement of any sort? I remember I had a friend at school who lost their father very young, and it was very sudden. And one of the things she said was that she found it really hard that no one would talk to her. People would cross the street because they didn't know how to speak to her, not because they didn't care, but they didn't know how best to do it.
Yeah.
What should you say to someone who's lost someone, and what should you not say?
So I understand it's hard when you know someone who has suddenly become bereft and you don't know what to say. But actually, not saying anything is probably the worst thing you can do, because it adds to that feeling of loss and abandonment. They've already lost someone, and now they're being abandoned by their closest friends and family. And they may recognise that you don't know what to say, but actually just being there is really important. And whatever you say is not going to make their loss any worse. It's not going to remind them of it, because they already know about it. So don't abandon your friend is the first thing I would say.
It's better to say something and get it wrong than say nothing?
Well, the best thing to say if you don't know what to say is just to say, I'm glad you told me, I am here. I don't know what to say, but I'm here if you need me. And just be really clear. I don't know what to say, but here I am sitting next to you. I'll be with you. And even if that means, because remember, when you've lost someone, you've got a big empty hole in your life.
Right.
Just sitting with someone, saying nothing is really supportive.
Yeah, that's really reminded me. When my dad was really, really, really unwell, his best friend came to the house every night for a week.
Yeah.
And was just there, and he would eat pasta with us. And he didn't say great words of wisdom. He was just physically there. Yeah. And I just really remember that as such a good example of, you don't need to offer some magical, mystical advice to someone that's going to suddenly heal them.
Yeah.
Just physically, him being there was deeply comforting.
That is comforting. Yeah. The other thing people worry about is talking about the person who's died as well. Right. So one of the things people who have lost someone get comfort from is talking about them in a positive way and using their names. So people often don't want to say the name of the dead person, but I think it's absolutely fine. So say, tell me about whoever.
Yeah.
Tell me something about when you went on holiday or when you used to do that. Talk to me about them and invite those stories in, because talking about them will really help with that healing process.
Why does that help someone?
Because it reinforces those positive memories. So when you're encouraging them to say what they enjoyed doing with their loved one, when they're thinking of them, they associate it then not with the loss, but those positive memories. There's a lot to overcome with grief, so it'll be hard to feel happy, but you will feel a little less sad, perhaps. And the other thing to do is really practical stuff. Right. Offer to bring food over, offer to do the shopping for them. If they've got children, go and pick them up from school for them. Right. All of those things are really helpful.
One of my friends who went through awful bereavement said she loved it when people didn't ask her what she wanted. She loved it when people were just bossy. Friends rallied around her and told her what they were going to do to help.
You know, when my dad died, part of our culture is to go and see the person who's lost someone. And now my mum's house was filled with, I would say, about 300 to 400 people for about a week. They'd come first thing in the morning. We'd still be in bed. The doorbell would start going and they'd start coming and they'd be there. Different people coming throughout the day, sitting with my mum, talking to her, making food, making tea for everyone till about 2 a.m.
And how long does that go on for?
So it's supposed to go on for 3 days. That's religiously, that's how long we are expected to grieve for. But that went on, I would say, for about a month.
Oh, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, there was like no parking anywhere. But it was so helpful for my mum, honestly, because there was not a day or night went past where she wasn't surrounded by people.
How did that affect you?
It was exhausting because you had to talk to a lot of people all the time. But again, it was about what they were doing for my mum. And I remember chatting to my friends about everything else apart from my dad, and we were laughing. That was really useful.
I think seeing people, it's the last thing you feel like doing when you're going through loss, but seeing people is like medicine.
Yeah.
I think that is a wonderful ritual to have. And I sometimes think that not all cultures have that ritual where you all come together and there's a really definite period of mourning. And I think it's a shame. We're physical beings. Is there any advice on what to say, how to approach a conversation if someone has experienced something like a miscarriage?
Those things are really hard to talk about. And it's all down to the person who's going through the experience to guide that conversation in terms of what they want to talk about. So if I'm talking to someone about it, I will ask them if they would like to talk about it, first of all.
That's such a good starting point.
Yeah.
It seems really obvious, but actually I think having that as an entry point will enable that conversation to happen.
Yeah. And it also helps not only gain permission from that person that it's okay to talk about it, but it also helps give you an idea of how they're feeling about that particular type of loss. And a miscarriage is a really good example because an early miscarriage may seem commonplace to some people, because 1 in 3 pregnancies can end in an early miscarriage. But for that person, that miscarriage was hopes, dreams, a baby. Right. And use the language that they use. So if they are referring to it as a baby loss, which it is to them, then that is the same language you should use, because they're putting such importance on that you have to make sure that you do the same, because you don't want to minimize their suffering in any way. And then ask them if it helps to talk about whatever it is that they've gone through and which aspects, and then talk about it with them. You're not going to make things worse by asking them if it's okay to do it, and let them lead that a little bit. One of the things not ever to say is, you can always get pregnant again, or you can always have another baby.
I think people want to offer something positive. Why is that one of the things that you shouldn't really say?
Because it just minimizes what they've gone through. It's like, oh, well, that one's gone. Let's get you another one now. And that is so painful to hear. And it doesn't acknowledge the loss process or the length of time it takes to grieve that loss either. And it doesn't legitimize the loss, because they're really going through something awful.
What about if someone's received the news that they have a terminal illness?
Yeah.
What's the best way to approach that?
So go to their home, talk to them face to face if you can. And I would, I'm going to take the medical side of this out of it, but just as a friend, I would ask them, first of all, how they're feeling about it, what their worries are around it as well, and what we think practically we can do to mitigate some of their concerns. And if they have any medical worries, perhaps they're really difficult for them to speak to a medical professional about, you can help go through them with them, write them down, and perhaps go and see the doctor together and say, these are my concerns with this, and that might, right. And then we can address them head on.
That's nice and practical. I like that idea of what are you worried about? What is it? Let's make an action plan.
Yeah.
That's really truly supportive.
If they want to be distracted, again, ask them that. Then just distract them. So that could be taking them out of the house, going to the cinema, doing something that they enjoy doing. A terminal illness doesn't necessarily mean that they're housebound or that they're physically ill at that moment in time. So perhaps ask them, before it gets to that stage, what would you like to do? And make an action plan in that, a bucket list almost, right?
Absolutely. Is there anything you should avoid saying to someone who's had that awful news?
The things not to say to someone who is bereft or going through a grief, and the loss of health is a grief process as well. So again, don't use phrases like "get over it" or it's time to move on, because again, it minimises that grief process. Or if they've lost someone, saying something like, oh, well, they lived a long life, again, minimises it. It doesn't acknowledge the loss. Because, yes, someone might have lived till 90, but they will have been married, or, they could be someone's dad for a really, really long time. And just to say, they lived a good quality life. Yes, it sounds positive, doesn't it? But it can be a really minimising thing to say.
Do you know what? I have to admit, I have said that before because I've wanted to kind of honour that person's long life and like you say, try and say something that's positive. But I can see why that is a mistake.
Yeah.
I really can.
A good alternative is to say, I remember when they did this with me. Okay. And that's a positive just experience rather than they had a really good long life. One of the worst things that you can do, I think, is to ring someone up and say, I'm here if you need anything, and then just vanish, because it puts the onus on that person to think about what you could do to help. But also, asking for help is really hard.
Right.
And so you have to then ring them up, ask for the help, hope that they're not busy and they'll do it. That's a lot for someone going through grief.
I think that is one of the biggest ones that I've learned over the years, is just show up.
Yeah.
I have to confess something which I didn't come out well in, but when I was younger, I had some friends who lost a family pet, and they would, they were sad for weeks, months, and I did start thinking, oh, come on, it's just a pet. And then later on in life, I experienced my own pet loss, and it was, months. I still feel really, really sad at the loss of this little animal who'd become my best friend over the years.
Yeah.
We do sometimes minimise pet loss. You don't get days off work if you lose a pet.
Yeah. But actually, your brain interprets pet loss because you're so connected to that animal, and the emotional connection, because they do give you unconditional love, like a person doesn't really. And that connection is so strong. The oxytocin, all the hormones that are associated with love, you associate with having that lovely little pet. And you can't say to your brain, it's only an animal, only be 30% sad, let's say. You can't say that to your brain because it doesn't interpret it that way. So pet loss is really real.
Does it also help prepare you for the process of death? Is that helpful for some?
It usually is a child's first experience of death. I don't know if it physically prepares you, but it certainly opens up conversations with the adults in your life around loss, depending on how they manage it. And if they have a good conversation with you about the loss of that pet, in terms of, remember the good times that you had together. This is what this pet brought into your life, and you'll never forget that. And I know this is sad, and acknowledge that sadness. It may well better prepare you for the loss of a loved one as you get older.
So extraordinary. I feel sad even thinking about my pet, my cat that died, that broke my heart into pieces.
That's a
he
great
was
name.
The coolest cat in the whole world.
I had a cat that died, Jacob, and it really broke my heart as well. I understand.
Extraordinary, the level of pain that they bring. So I think, if you know someone who's lost a pet, do that
Take it
grocery
seriously.
shopping, give them love and support, because it can really be awful. You'll probably be quite pleased to hear this, but we're not actually going to do Chat GP today.
I am pleased.
Breath of relief. Because next up in the following episodes, we're going to be doing a bumper episode of questions that you've sent in, which I'm really excited about.
I'm looking forward to that,
That's
actually.
going to be really interesting. If anything in this episode has affected you, we're going to have lots of information about how you can get support and help. That'll be in the show notes. Do you have a health hack for this week?
I've got a really simple one, I think. If you know someone who is suffering from grief or bereavement, even if it happened a while ago, but they're still struggling with it, just go over to their home, if you can, and sit with them. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. Even just put on a movie and just say, let's watch a movie together. It may be the Friday night they used to do that with their loved one and now they don't and they're alone. Yeah. So sitting with them is just a really nice thing to do, and it will be good for you as well.
Just show up.
Yeah.
That is all we've got time for on No Appointment Necessary this week.
Next week, we're doing Q&A, so we're answering all your questions. Don't miss that episode. See you next time on No Appointment Necessary.